I built that ship and I died trying to save people." Those were the chilling words that came out of Jamey's mouth, a boy just 5 years old, while he was watching a documentary about the Titanic. His eyes filled with tears, his hands shook, and he went on, "I am Thomas Andrews. I created the perfect vessel, but I couldn't save everyone." Jamey's mother, utterly stunned, watched her little boy spiral into panic at the footage of the disaster. How could a child so young have such an intense emotional reaction to something that happened over a century ago? What you're about to hear is one of the most unsettling reincarnation cases ever recorded, a true story investigated by the TV program The Ghost Inside My Child that left parapsychology experts without answers. Thomas Andrews was the brilliant chief architect of the RMS Titanic, a man who died at 39 while trying to protect others during the catastrophe of 1912. More than 100 years later, a young American boy began to display impossible memories of a life that wasn't his, of a tragedy he could never have lived. From a very early age, Jamey showed an inexplicable fixation on the Titanic. It wasn't normal childhood curiosity. It was something far deeper and far more disturbing. He cried when he saw images of the ship, talked about technical details no child his age should know, and, most unnerving of all, referred to the Titanic as my ship, speaking about passengers as if he knew them personally. "I didn't get enough lifeboats on board," he'd say through tears, with a burden of guilt no child should carry. The most haunting moment, however, came during a visit to a maritime museum. Jamey, just 5, looked at a scale model of the Titanic and began pointing out specifics with a precision that left the museum staff speechless. This was the engine room. Over there were the main boilers, and those stairs led to the first-class staterooms. Jamey said, as if giving a master class in naval engineering. His mother froze. A 5-year-old couldn't possibly know this kind of technical information unless he had somehow lived inside that ship. What shook her even more was when Jamey started describing Thomas Andrews' final moments. With tears in his eyes, he said, "I was in the smoking room, checking the blueprints one last time. The ship was going down, and I knew there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone. I stayed to help people, women, and children first." The details were exact. Historical witnesses really did report that Thomas Andrews was last seen in the Titanic smoking room, studying the construction plans as the ship sank. How could Jamey know that? The family decided to dig deeper. They learned that Thomas Andrews was born on February 7, 1873, in Northern Ireland. He served as the lead designer at the Harland and Wolff shipyard, responsible for the Titanic's project. He died at age 39 during the sinking on April 15, 1912. What unnerved them most was discovering that Jamey was born on the exact anniversary of Andrews' death. April 15th, exactly 100 years later. Coincidence? What unfolded in the following weeks would make even skeptics rethink that idea. The family's inquiry took an even stranger turn when they decided to test Jamey in a way no 5-year-old could fake. They set dozens of old photographs in front of him, mixing images of the Titanic with other ships from the same era. Without hesitation, Jamey immediately picked the correct ones. "That's my ship. This is the bridge where I worked. And here that's where my office was." But when they showed him a photograph of Thomas Andrews, something extraordinary happened. Jamey fell silent for several seconds. His eyes brimmed with tears, and he whispered, "That's me. I was slimmer back then." The most spine-tingling moment came during a session with a child psychologist who specializes in anomalous memory cases. Jamey was guided into a deep state of relaxation and began speaking with a Northern Irish lilt Thomas Andrews' accent. His voice changed completely. "My name is Thomas Andrews, Jr. I was born in Comer, County Down, Northern Ireland. My father's name was Thomas as well, and my mother was Eliza Purry." The psychologist later verified every detail. All of it checked out. Jamey had never studied the Andrews family, never heard of the small town of Comer, and certainly knew nothing about Thomas's parents. Where was this information coming from? The ultimate test was yet to come. The family managed to gain access to the original blueprints of the Titanic technical drawings stored in the archives of White Star Line, documents not even most historians could easily consult. When Jamey was shown the plans, he immediately began pointing out modifications he claimed to have made during the construction. Here, I changed the thickness of the hull. This wall I reinforced, and over here I added extra supports. Modern naval engineers reviewed his statements and confirmed. Every adjustment Jamey mentioned matched alterations found in the ship's final design. Something impossible was happening in plain sight. But the most shocking revelation came when Jamey began to draw. Without any reference material, he took pencil and paper and sketched with uncanny accuracy the interior layout of the Titanic. Each corridor, each staircase, each cabin was perfectly placed. These weren't childish drawings. They looked like professional architectural blueprints straight from the desk of an experienced shipbuilder. This was the engine room. These were the furnace boilers. And this secret passage led straight to the emergency deck, Jamey explained, sketching as if revisiting his own home. The most disturbing part came when he drew something no history book had ever mentioned. A secret room Thomas Andrews had supposedly designed as his private retreat. I stayed here when I needed to think alone. Nobody else knew about this room, Jamey said, carefully outlining a small chamber connected to Andrews's office. His parents remained doubtful until a naval historian they consulted confirmed it. Recently uncovered records from Harland and Wolff indeed referenced a private workspace belonging to Thomas Andrews, something never publicly documented. A 5-year-old child had just revealed a secret hidden for more than a century. The most intense moment came during a virtual simulation of the Titanic disaster. As Jamey watched the computer-generated recreation of the ship's final hours, he broke down completely. "No, I have to go back. There are still people inside," he screamed, desperately trying to run toward the screen. "I promised Mrs. Honora Widener I would save her son. I promised," he cried, sobbing uncontrollably while his mother tried to hold him. But Jamey kept repeating, "I couldn't save everyone. It was my fault. I built the ship, but I didn't put enough lifeboats." It was as though the century-old guilt of Thomas Andrews was consuming the soul of an innocent child. Things grew even stranger when Jamey began reciting the names of Titanic passengers as if they were lifelong friends. Colonel Gracie was a very polite man. Mrs. Brown, the one they call Molly, she was incredibly brave. And Captain Smith, poor man, he trusted the ship so much. He spoke of these people with an emotional intimacy that no child could possibly have. But when he mentioned the victims, his breakdown was devastating. Little Lorraine Allison, she was only 2. "I couldn't save her," Jamey said, crying hysterically as though reliving the tragedy itself. The most chilling detail came when Jamey described private conversations between Thomas Andrews and other crew members during the final hours. "Captain Smith asked me how much time we had. I told him, 1 hour, maybe an hour and a half at most. He went quiet, then thanked me for my honesty." Naval historians were floored. That specific exchange between Andrews and Smith had only ever been mentioned in a rare testimony buried deep in the 1912 British Inquiry Archive, something never published in popular books or documentaries. How could a young American child possibly know that? Experts in reincarnation from the University of Virginia were soon brought in to examine the case. Dr. Jim Tucker's successor to the renowned Dr. Ian Stevenson was astonished by the sheer number of verifiable details Jamey provided. "In over 40 years of studying reincarnation cases, I have rarely seen a child with such specific and emotionally charged memories," Tucker declared. Jamey was put through rigorous memory and personality tests, as well as neurological evaluations. The results all pointed toward something science couldn't explain. The child genuinely seemed to carry both the memories and the emotional trauma of Thomas Andrews. During therapy sessions, Jamey began to reveal technical knowledge about shipbuilding that left professional engineers dumbfounded. He described in detail how the Titanic's watertight compartments worked. The ship could survive if 4 compartments filled with water, but the iceberg tore open 5. That's why there was no chance. A 5-year-old boy was explaining principles of naval engineering that take years of study to master. I miscalculated the steel's resistance to freezing temperatures in the North Atlantic. If I had known, I would have used a different kind of steel, he confessed, speaking with a sorrow so deep it shattered hearts. The most extraordinary event came when Jamey was taken on a virtual reality dive through the Titanic's wreck. As he walked through the submerged corridors, he navigated them as though he knew every inch. My cabin was here. The smoking lounge was in that direction, he explained, guiding the virtual explorers with absolute precision until he reached the remains of the very room where Thomas Andrews was last seen alive. There, Jamey collapsed into another devastating panic attack. I was sitting right here, looking at the clock. It was 2:05 a.m. I knew I only had a few minutes left. His descriptions matched perfectly with historical accounts from the last witnesses who saw Andrews alive. When a team of documentary filmmakers decided to challenge Jamey with falsified evidence, the case took an even more surreal turn. They showed him a doctored photograph of the Titanic, deliberately filled with inaccuracies. Jamey's reaction was immediate and almost angry. "This is wrong. The funnels didn't tilt like that. The lifeboats weren't in that position. And that hull color completely wrong for the White Star Line," he snapped, his voice trembling with outrage. As if they were insulting his masterpiece. The crew was stunned. How could a child detect technical flaws that even experts might miss? But the strangeness didn't end there. Psychologists soon discovered that Jamey carried highly specific phobias with no explanation in his present life. He panicked whenever he heard ship sirens. He refused to bathe in bathtubs, terrified they would fill up like compartments with water. And night after night, he woke up screaming from recurring nightmares of icy waves. "Mom, I dreamed again. I was drowning in the cold, dark ocean. People were crying for help, but I couldn't swim to them," he sobbed, trembling in her arms. These terrors had no origin in Jamey's current life, yet they made perfect sense if seen as echoes of Thomas Andrews's final hours. The case took an even stranger twist when Jamey revealed inexplicable artistic abilities. Without ever having studied technical drawing, he began producing flawless blueprints of ships that didn't exist, but that perfectly followed early 20th century naval design standards. This ship would be safer than the Titanic. "Look, I added more lifeboats here, and I made the watertight bulkheads taller," he explained while sketching. Modern engineers who reviewed his work were stunned. The designs weren't just accurate. They were innovative and technically feasible. It was as though Thomas Andrews was working through Jamey, finishing projects death had interrupted. Paranormal specialists who examined his sketches made a chilling discovery. Many of Jamey's improvements were identical to the safety changes that were actually implemented in shipbuilding after the Titanic disaster. Increased lifeboat capacity, taller watertight compartments, and upgraded emergency communication systems. "It's as if he learned from his own mistakes and came back to correct them," one researcher commented. The most extraordinary moment happened during a session of past life hypnosis. While in a trance, Jamey began to speak in Old Irish Gaelic, a dialect so obscure that even modern linguists barely master it. "Tansel fos nil marb, I am still here. I am not dead," he murmured, with a distinctive accent of County Down. Linguistic analysis confirmed he was using expressions and pronunciations specific to Thomas Andrews's birthplace in the early 1900s. An American child speaking a nearly extinct dialect of rural Ireland? It defied all logic. Then came the call that left Jamey's family breathless. A direct descendant of Thomas Andrews, still living in Northern Ireland, had seen the documentary and wanted to meet the boy. "My great-grandfather was Thomas's cousin. Our family still has letters and personal belongings that were never made public," the man explained. During the virtual meeting, he showed old family photographs. Jamey's reaction was instant and heartbreaking. "Uncle William! That's Uncle William!" he cried out with joy, pointing at a man in one of the faded photos. "He taught me how to fish in the Coma River when I was a boy." The descendant was stunned. The photograph had never been published, and William Andrews really had been Thomas's uncle. But the most chilling moment came when the man revealed a family heirloom, Thomas Andrews's personal pocket watch, recovered after the tragedy and kept in the family for over a century. The second Jamey saw it, his hands began to tremble violently. His face went pale. He broke into a cold sweat and entered an almost trance-like state. It was 2:05. I was looking at this watch. I knew I only had a few minutes left. I thought of my wife Helen and my daughter Elizabeth, he whispered, tears streaming down his cheeks. The exact time he gave matched historical estimates of when Thomas Andrews was last seen alive. Everyone present was overwhelmed with emotion. The past and present had never felt so close, so visceral. Researchers decided to push the investigation even further with what they called a behavioral DNA test. Jamey was placed in simulated situations identical to those Thomas Andrews had faced in his work problems of naval engineering. Design decisions, structural calculations. His methods were eerily identical to Andrews's. "I always start by calculating the hull's weight, then the distribution of the boilers. That's how my mind works," Jamey explained, replicating step by step. The approach documented in Andrews's original diaries from Harland and Wolff. The family later traveled with Jamey to Belfast, the very site where the Titanic had been built. The moment his feet touched the century-old shipyard, Jamey entered a strange, altered state. He walked directly to places that no longer existed, pointing them out with certainty. "This was my workshop. Over there was the drafting table where I designed the ship. And here, this exact spot is where I first saw the Titanic fully assembled," he said, guiding his family through ghosts of buildings long gone. Local tour guides were astonished. Jamey was describing the shipyard's 1912 layout with total accuracy, details preserved only in specialized architectural records. But the most emotional moment came when Jamey was led to the Thomas Andrews Memorial in Belfast. He didn't react with the curiosity of a child seeing a statue. Instead, he fell silent, standing before it as though visiting his own grave. After a long pause, he whispered through tears, "Helen, Elizabeth, I miss them so much." Without any prompting, Jamey had recalled the names of Andrews's wife and daughter. No textbooks, no documentaries, nothing external had given him that information. What surfaced were the most intimate memories of Thomas Andrews, the love for the family he left behind on Fan. That fateful night in April 1912, Jamey's extraordinary case eventually gained worldwide attention when he appeared on the Biography Channel program The Ghost Inside My Child, which interviews children who claim to remember past lives. During the recording, Jamey stunned the crew by correcting historical mistakes in the script and providing details about the Titanic that even the researchers hadn't known. "We've never seen a child with so much verifiable information about a past life," the executive producer admitted. Now at 12 years old, Jamey still carries Thomas Andrews's memories, but in a more balanced way. Therapists specializing in reincarnation helped him process the emotional trauma of his past life death. He still draws ships, but now with the carefree joy of a child, no longer with the crushing weight of century-old guilt. "I understand now it wasn't my fault. I did the best I could with the knowledge I had at the time," Jamey says, showing a maturity far beyond his years. To honor Andrews's legacy, the family created a foundation dedicated to maritime safety and education about the Titanic. Jamey plays an active role, sharing his unique memories with historians and naval engineers. His contributions have already inspired new theories about the sinking and improvements in modern naval safety protocols. "Maybe that's why I came back," Jamey reflects with wisdom far older than 12, "to help make the seas safer." Jamey's story was formally documented by Dr. Jim Tucker at the University of Virginia, one of the world's leading experts on childhood reincarnation memories. and later published in scientific journals focused on paranormal research. In addition to his appearance on The Ghost Inside My Child, Jamey's case was also featured in documentaries by Discovery Channel and National Geographic. Skeptics continue to search for conventional explanations, but none have been able to account for the sheer volume of technical, historical, and emotional details Jamey demonstrated from the age of 2. Whether one believes in life after death or not, Jamey's case forces us to confront the limits of human consciousness and to consider the possibility that certain memories might transcend physical death. Perhaps through Jamey, Thomas Andrews finally found peace. Perhaps his mission was completed, ensuring that tragedies like the Titanic would never again happen because of human negligence. What do you think about this story? Do you believe Jamey truly is the reincarnation of Thomas Andrews, or is there another explanation? Share your reflections in the comments and join our community Circle of Lives, a space dedicated to respectful discussions on reincarnation, spirituality, and the mysteries of human consciousness.